What are some of the tips you can give somebody that's starting to look at this asset class, looking to develop?
Put the right team around you, because that'll help you get rid of a lot of your mistakes, right? The right engineering guys, the right people to talk to, the right agents, getting the right information, understanding the area, understanding if you want to build in the city, what restrictions and requirements you're going to have, because those are the things that we see people make the biggest mistakes on, is thinking they can rezone something. And it's actually not as easy as people think. And I'm a big believer, if it's not zoned for it, we don't even bat a second eye at it. We just move on to the next. I'll give the city a great concept. There's no way they can say no. And cities, as you know, they love saying no. It's their go-to. And so they got their no guns, and they're like, no.
Cody Payne. Man, I am so grateful that you're here today.
No, I appreciate it. I wanted to be here. I'm glad I'm here. I like it.
Yeah. This is our first podcast. A little crazy. I had to start a podcast because I've never been invited on one. So just had to do our own thing.
We always thought about, what's funny is me and the guys, we always thought about starting one, but we guessed on so many people's that we just figured that was a little bit better avenue. And, obviously, you want to have the right people to do it and, the right energy to do it and, the people that want to do it. And so, no, I think this is a phenomenal one because it's about, an asset class that, we specialize in, that you're, working in. And it's something that I truly believe is the future commercial real estate investment.
That's right. That's why we're going to call this particular episode Flex 101. 101, baby. Actually, I'll tell people how I got introduced to you by Mark Allen, our buddy.
Yeah,
Mark
good
Allen.
friend of mine.
Yeah, good friend of yours.
Yeah.
I was telling Mark this is probably a little bit over 2 years ago, maybe even 3, right out of COVID, when we were looking to expand our asset classes because, come from the resi side, residential.
That's right. He did do that as well. I forgot about that.
He did a little warm introduction.
Okay.
I believe. We may spoke on the phone, said, hey, send me some warehouses, some flex stuff. And before you know it, we're just building them instead of just buying them. And
that's the best way to go.
I think so.
In my opinion.
I think so. The market is hot for it. So I think to build equity and also to introduce a modern facilities.
Well, and also, the biggest thing about Flex, what I tell anybody, which I think you're doing a good job on, is Flex 4 years ago is a different model than Flex today. Right. It's amenitized so much. It's changed so much. It looks so much different than what it did. And so, if you're going to invest in it and buy it currently, obviously the fight is for infill and, for stuff that's good, high quality, and then you got the lower quality asset stuff. But when you go to build it, you can build to, what the market demand is, where the best driver's at, where you can find ways to insulate yourself from, other competitors, really drive the market, be the market leader. And you can really only do that when you're building, not when you're buying existing.
100%. Yeah. 100%. Too, you just recently wrote a book, I believe it's on Amazon, if anybody's interested, called Flex Space Domination. It's incredible. I think maybe the first kind, or the book of its first kind.
I think so. Another guy in our office who Austin Edelman, him and I worked very, very hard. A couple of the other guys, Tran and Nick, had some input in there, but it's a book that Austin and I have worked on for a long time. And, it's just it's really, we did that because we have so many people across the country coming to us like, hey, we want to get into flex space. Like, give me the rundown. Give me your time. Let's talk about it and whatnot. And we always say, hey, yeah, love talking about it. We love it. We're also going to send you this book as well. This will help give you, our insights, because I've been doing it since 2005. And so it's just got, everything that we see. And also, it's also a book that is, something that's directed towards, maximizing value out of the parks and, best practices, what to look out for, and, how we go about when we do something, whether we syndicate or build or whatnot, how we do it as well. And so we wanted to put something on paper. It's written just like we talk. So, you got to, anybody that reads it needs to bear with us a little bit. But, we're not the most college educated individuals, but very driven. And so, but yeah, we're very proud of it. We like it a lot. And what's funny is as soon as we put it on Amazon, like immediately became like number 8 in commercial real estate. And
wow.
I think it's a lot of it's because you're right. I think there's not a book on flex space, and because there's so much interest coming into it, people are just Googling it.
Yeah.
And so it helped sell quite a few of it. Now we're not becoming millionaires off the book or anything of that nature, but
not yet at least.
Yeah, not yet at least. But it's something that was on our to-do list for a long time. And when I was a kid, I never thought I'd end up writing a book because I never thought I'd end up reading a book either. So it kind of worked out well.
Well, so since 2005.
Yeah.
Tell us about your backstory, like how you got into the space. You got into it when this was like more kind of a unsophisticated asset class, if I may say so.
It was the dog of asset classes
Yeah.
back then. And I always tell people it's funny. I went to work for a guy who did big box industrial.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have a college degree. I was fresh out of high school, and he only hired me just because he needed agents, and he kept losing agents. So he's like, "Look, I'll bring you on, but I want you to go work on this asset class and stay out of my stuff." And I didn't think anything of it. I was just happy to, be a commercial real estate agent. So I went to start working on it, and like I said, lo and behold, the tenant sizes were like closer to 8,000 square feet that you were seeing. Really, no institutions would look at it. It was all smaller, private ownerships, really low rental rates. A lot of it was non-triple net. It was very hard to lease, really hard to sell. We were selling them at like $25-$30 a foot.
Wow.
Which, is vastly different than what it is today. But for a while there, I actually thought the broker was like trying to kill my career. I'm like, man, he just wanted me out of here because I'm sitting here working on this stuff. Nobody wants to lease it. Nobody wants to buy it. And lo and behold, over time, the asset class evolved. The tenant size slowly started to shrink down a little bit. Just the evolution of how business is done. Just think about the vast difference of, back then to how businesses were done. And, now somebody that has like 3 companies, which back then that was like you didn't really see that very often. And so with e-commerce and shipping and just, the explosion of the entrepreneur really helped these models drive and succeed a lot. And then what brought the eyes onto it was really when COVID hit, because inflation really started rising, and all these institutions and funds and family offices that were investing in office, retail, multifamily, when a tenant would leave, they would have to refinish out those spaces, and the costs were just astronomical. And so, like, there's projects in Dallas that, we worked with a group that, 7 years ago, the finish out for the office was $10 a foot. That same office is $50 a foot now, but the rental rate hasn't changed. And so those guys coming to this asset class, they started looking at this going, hey, this is a low TI turnover deal. It's got a high velocity of tenants. It's got good rental growth. And that's the other thing that's really helped the explosion of it and to help bring the rents up, help bring the values up. Because, like I said, a while back ago, you wouldn't have ever seen one of these trading for over 100 a foot. And nowadays, we don't ever see them trading under it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's nuts. Going back to 2005, who were the typical sellers?
Larry Wayne and, just the small mom and pop owners that maybe had a business in there and, leased out the other portion. It was kind of like a duplex feel. It kind of seemed like back in the day because, back then it was a lot more prevalent to buy a duplex, live in a part of it, and rent out the other part, right? That's how a lot of people did it. And these were very similar styles to that. And so, but there wasn't as much metal construction. A lot of it was tilt wall. A lot of it was infill. And, a lot of it was older, something that was maybe owner-usered at one point and then kind of broke off into, incremental spaces. But like I said, the space sizes were substantially larger back then. And I think that was, the other hurdle that they had. And that was that way across the country.
Yeah. So mostly flex space was built by owners needing an office space, needing to warehouse.
It was mostly warehouse, yeah.
Yeah. And then like a plumber, electrician, kind of your blue collar guys, right?
Yeah, and it wasn't called flex space back then. It was called shallow bay industrial.
Right. We talked about this the other day.
And
Small bay.
Yeah, there's a lot of terms for it. People call it incubator, people call it contractor warehouses, but back then it was called shallow bay industrial.
That's right.
And, interestingly enough, too, a lot of it had dock high as well. And as you know now, that's not as useful for a smaller tenant. And so, but yeah, it's evolved a lot. It really started to catch fire, around 2015. And then 2018, 2020, and then so on and so forth.
2015, what's significant about that? Was that kind of when e-commerce started?
That's when, and the entrepreneur business, and all those companies like Upwork and Fiverr, where the online entrepreneurs were there. And so it just kind of became, our industry just became a lot more entrepreneurial than previously. And so I think the expansion of small businesses, but also as metroplexes continue to expand, companies that service large areas had started using satellite branches instead. And so, like for a prime example, a long time ago, there was a CO2 company that delivers the CO2 for restaurants that, have their Dr. Peppers and Cokes and whatnot. They were centralized out there in Arlington. Well, as the Metroplex got bigger and bigger, that owner, they couldn't service it all. So they actually downsized that branch and then did a bunch of satellite branches in small bay flex spaces all across DFW. And that's happened all across the U.S. as well. And so that's also helped it out a lot because, as you know, the service side of the business, right, especially with Amazon, next day shipping, things of that nature, the service side has changed a lot too, because back then, if your AC went out, you were waiting a few days, maybe a week, then an AC got to be out. If your AC's out today, you got to have that thing fixed tonight.
Right.
And the only reason I know that is because our AC went out yesterday. And I got home and my wife was like, it's 83 in here, it's not that bad. And I mean,
just sweating
she
bullets.
was shiny, and I'm like sweating, and I'm like, no, this ain't going to happen. But the service side has changed a lot too, and that's what a lot of people don't realize. And so, because so many of these with the, contractors that are in them, the contracting businesses, landscapers, plumbers, I mean, they're sourcing and they're feeding these locations, right? And they're taking care of these neighborhoods and these, businesses. And so to call a guy, out in Waxahachie to come fix something, up in North Fort Worth just doesn't happen anymore. And so that's the other thing that's kind of helped it out quite a bit.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm still kind of interested about when you started in 2005, he kind of put you in the back room, so to speak, to deal with flex or small bay or shallow bay.
He was either a genius or he was lucky.
Yeah.
I don't know which.
And when did it go like, hey, I'm, just kind of pilling around with this small product to going, man, I love this. Like, I'm going to be, if I dare say, I think you're one of the top brokers in this space. I've talked to a lot of brokers, and I feel like you're one of the most knowledgeable ones in the space. And so how did that turn into like, hey, I'm getting into commercial, and then before you know it, but it's been a few years, you're one of the top guys in the space. So,
I met some guys actually out of state that were buying some of these and really kind of fixing them up, making them look a little bit more retro, modern, adding a showroom retail feel to it, which you didn't really see. That was more of a West Coast thing. And you never really saw that in other states. And so, starting to see some of those guys change these up a little bit, seeing the success that they had and how diverse this asset can actually be. Mm-hmm. Was something that really, I think, started to excite me. Also built a really good team that's been with me for a long time. And, at the end of the day, we just enjoy working, making money, having fun together, and, helping other people succeed at it. And that, is very rewarding for us. And so, there was really no moment where I was like, I just found, the greatest thing ever. It was a slow evolution of the asset class because, like I said, for the first 5 years, it was just a dogfight. We'd list the deal and it'd be listed for like a year.
Wow.
And now if we bring out a flex deal, it's under contract that week usually. And so it's changed quite a bit. And so, but the buyer pool also is extremely different. Back then it was all localized.
Right.
They were buying it. Now, if you take our sales last year, 70+% were out of state buying in Texas.
Interesting.
And so that's something that you didn't see back then either. So that brings a lot of excitement as well, because then it allows us to do a lot more national business, bring in a lot more national guys, make it a lot more competitive. And so, also seeing that, hey, we can be the specialist in this, we can be the drivers of it, we can, figure out how to kind of move this train onto the next level to really bring in the institutions. That's where we started to get a lot of excitement in it, because if we can, help funds build up portfolio of these, sell them off to institutions, we're a part of a couple funds that are building them, and we're investing them in these assets as well. That's our real main goal, is to own as much of these as possible, and then maybe look to actually take one of these funds public one day.
That's amazing.
I think that would be really cool.
I know. We've talked about this too, offline a little bit. It will happen. It's going to be amazing.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So the buyers, you said they're coming from out of state. Is there any particular state they're coming from that you're seeing like a concentration? Is it California guys or?
That's that's the broker term right there. Where we've got the brokers call and they go, we've got a California buyer.
That's right.
That wants your building. No, they're coming from all over. We're doing stuff with guys in Jersey, Washington, a lot from guys in Colorado.
Institutional guys or private dudes?
Both.
Okay.
A lot of family offices are getting into this, which is very unique. They usually stuck to the safer stuff like multifamily and self-storage. They were really big on self-storage. But, they're coming from Colorado. They're coming from everywhere. And even when we're working on a project in another state, it's crazy to see how many of those are from out-of-state guys as well. And so even like if you're working on something from Oklahoma, you'd be surprised how much out-of-state money actually owns in Oklahoma. Not as much, obviously, as Texas, because certain states are physical location states, so they have certain taxes that you got to pay to take your money out. That's why you don't have a lot of people in Texas investing in California, because you got that transfer tax. And so that's why so many people invest in Florida and Texas, because they like the rules and regulations of taking their money out and bringing it back in. But it's people all over. I mean, we're doing a lot of business with people from Canada right now as well. Michael's working with quite a few folks out of Vietnam, and so I mean, it's coming from all angles.
International.
Yeah.
Holy cow. And you're selling mostly parks, right? Industrial parks, or
that's our main forte is small bay industrial parks.
Yeah.
And so you won't see us selling a multifamily complex or a retail center or anything like that. I mean, we're pretty specialized in what we do. We'll sell off a little bit of office here and there, but yeah, our main focus is this and across the U.S.
I hear multifamily is struggling a bit these days.
It depends on who you talk to, right? You talk to a multifamily broker, and as they're walking out of the gas station with their scratch off lottery ticket, they're like, nah, it's never been better. It's really good. But I do think that there's a lot of struggle in there. I think a lot of it's due to the syndications.
Sure.
Because as you know, multifamily is similar to residential, where it's like a syndicator's dream, right? Like that's where they always went. And so a lot of them are coming to this asset class, but I think that's where some of those guys get hit is by those variable interest rates.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of those syndicators were getting. And so you got the bridge loans, you got interest rates that change so much over time. And so it's not uncommon to see a multifamily project. We actually had a group that called us that was looking at one in Houston that went into foreclosure, and it was fully leased. And it's because it was a syndicator that had it, couldn't get any money from a capital call, so he couldn't refinance it.
That one was in the news, wasn't it? Was that the one?
Oh, they're always in the news right now. Yeah.
Man, that was one.
You've got the ones out here in downtown, that was the office buildings that they were trying to convert over to multifamily. I mean, a lot of those went out too. So I don't know. I think multifamily, but office is also going to have a big restructure over the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. There's a lot of grumbling on X right now, formerly known as Twitter.
Formerly. There is. There's so many of those, not just Anon's accounts.
We won't call any names.
Yeah, but there's a lot of them out there that are, we always followed an account called Baller Busters, and they were really good about going out. Yeah.
I heard somebody busted that one.
I think so. Well, I mean, you go after enough big people, I mean, at some point, they'll take you down or something. And so that's why you always got to be careful when you're playing with bigger fish.
Oh, yeah.
And so, even Grant Cardone said that, he always wanted a jet, and he thought, he had made it when he finally got it. But then when he went out there to go get in it, it was the smallest jet in the row of jets, and he realized he was actually a small fish. So he said that a long time ago, so I thought that was very interesting. But yeah, no, there's a lot of stuff like that. I mean, there's plenty of people, in the small bay world that I think are in trouble. That's why we've seen so many people call us with land that, they bought and say, hey, we bought this land. It was a lot harder to, get the rezoning or get the financing for, or, the prices of steel have gone up too much, or our payback to our investors is too much, so we need to just sell it, liquidate it. And we've been running across a lot more of that lately than I've ever seen.
Interesting. And these are guys that were underwriting the deal with kind of interest rates of like 2-3 years ago, right? Is that kind of what the issue was?
Yes, and so like a prime example was a guy who I met, super nice guy. He bought a project, it was about 2 years ago, and spent the last 2 years getting rezoning and TxDOT to give him a driveway. Mm-hmm. Well, he shot way past his projection period because he's paying back money to these investors quarterly as well. And so he came to us because, he should have started construction 18 months ago. Mm-hmm. And he just came to us and goes, hey, I just now got the approval to start this thing, but now my interest rate to do the build is, way up here. And so it just doesn't make sense. I just need to get rid of it. And that's a story that we've heard quite a bit. And so that's why, anytime we're directing somebody to build something or do something, it's, you want to get all your ducks in a row. First and foremost, if you can't get as much feasibility time period as possible, then you need to figure out what risks you're willing to take, because, that's what's killing people right now is the interest rates. And if you're a syndicator, the prefs that they're paying back to their investors.
Yeah. And last year was brutal. I mean, every quarter, right, there was a little bit of a raise on the interest rate. And it's like, how in the world do you control that environment? So I feel for a lot of these guys that were raising money. And then
that's why the most successful ones that we see right now are the independents that are doing it with their own money, their own decisions. They're controlling everything. Yeah. not having to answer and pay back. And, they're usually a little bit more conservative too. I will tell you that's one thing that I've found in my experience of dealing with, investors and syndicators is when it's your own personal money, you're usually a lot more cautious than when it's other people's money. And so that's why it's not uncommon for some of these, syndication funds to, and I was telling you about that would call us and go, hey, we want to buy this building. How do we get it? Can I write you a check for, $50,000 and, you kind of give us the recommendation. And so you'll never hear a private guy say that because it's their money. And so there's always a big difference in people when they're dealing with their money or other people's money.
Yeah. Well, I was on a call this morning. I was telling you about the Zoom call with some syndicators, professional syndicators.
That's right.
And we're self-funding all of our deals currently, and we're developing as well.
Yeah.
So I think you're absolutely right. When it's your own money, when you're the one developing them, you worry about every cent.
Oh, yeah.
And timing is everything, and making sure you have a good process and strategy to accomplish the project is really important because it's your money.
Well, and like I'll tell you, that's like with anything in life. I mean, if I buy a Corvette, I'm going to treat it differently than if you bought it for me. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
And so it's no different. But, yeah, that's one clear difference that we see with syndicators and private investors is that mentality.
And you got a nice Corvette, by the way.
I love Corvettes. I've been a Corvette fan since I was a kid. Always wanted one. Actually, I just got rid of a 79 that I had.
Jeez.
That was real cool. But, I'm a big Corvette guy. I feel like Corvette, what I always tell people, and I'll be quick on it, is Corvette, people say, my car's faster or something like that. Well, no, Corvettes were built to win. And so I feel that, I feel that the cars, they're just made to win, and they're just dogs. You can treat them like dogs, and they'll get up every morning and give you the same service they did the day before.
I won't disagree.
Yeah,
they've got a great motor, really, but I do like Porsches.
No, Porsches are good cars, but I feel that if you want to push something to the brink for a long time, I feel that those LS motors are made to do that.
Mm-hmm. Are we doing a track day maybe?
Absolutely, yeah.
That's great. No, I do love your Corvette. I got to see it today. It's beautiful.
Appreciate it.
Okay, so since this is Flex 101, why are so many eyes on this asset class at this moment in time?
A couple things. Like I said, the fight for inflation is the commercial real estate investors' struggle across all asset classes. So whenever you have a tenant turnover, the only asset that I believe is better than this one on TIs is going to be self-storage. Because there's nothing, when a tenant leaves, there's nothing in there. You sweep it out and you're done. Yeah. Flex, you may have to repaint a few things here and there, whatnot, but for the most part, we see a lot of tenants putting their own money into the space, and that's what gives them, a lot of times makes them stay in the spaces for a substantial amount of time because of the dedication of money they have in there. So the TI is number one. Number two is the versatility, and the versatility has changed quite a bit because it's not uncommon to see a park not just have light industrial tenants, but to also have retail, also have office, to also have showroom. And so there's no other asset class that you'll find that can tailor to that broad of a tenant audience or tenant pool.
That's right.
And so, we're selling a project right now in North Fort Worth. It's got office tenants. It's got mechanics. It's got showroom guys. It's got retail. It's got a couple of retail tenants. I talked to one of them. They came from a retail center because they said, we don't get drive-by business anymore. That's just not how retail's done. They say, people just come here. We got a better space, higher ceilings, cheaper rent, and it's much better. And so they can source, they can use some of that money towards marketing and other things to, help generate more business. And so, you got this park here that, just say retail went into the gutter. Well, you still got, the office side, the showroom side, the contractor side. Well, if the office side goes, then you still have all the others. So it is such a versatile asset class that you just won't find in any other product type. And so if you're going to find it with any other asset class, it then becomes a conversion deal, right? Because you can't see office really doing anything else unless you convert it to multifamily, convert it to hotel, convert it to self-storage, which people do. This one, however, a tenant can leave, no one can come in. It can be a showroom guy, it can be a landscaper, it can be a retail guy, it can be whatever you want. And so that's the other thing that's made them so versatile. That's why I always preach the showroom flex model, which I think you've heard me say. That's my favorite model because that's the one that does tailor to everybody. When you build the cheap, efficient model, you're just sticking to your contractor base, right? Plumbers, electricians, car guys, things of that nature. When you do the showroom model, you then open it up to the largest tenant pool that you'll find.
That's right. And that's what we're focused on. I think you certainly probably inspired that as well with our conversations. And
highest rates, highest paying buyers, largest buyer pool, largest tenant pool. I mean, you literally, whenever somebody builds a showroom model, we've never seen it go wrong.
I think as an investor developer, you have to also kind of make up your mind. A lot of people that come into FlexSpace are so focused on like cost, right?
Yes.
And so cost is like cheap building, door, overhead door. That's it. You know, a little office, overhead door. But I think what's important is you have to think about your tenant pool and how do you survive when things get a little shaky. And the more flexible the building is, and versatile, right? The more options you have to gather in a tenant pool. And that was the conversation we had actually with a group of syndicators this morning, is that I think that's why maybe even the banks like it currently, right?
Yeah, they love it. They used to not like it.
It's so flexible. That when things get shaky, we can move, right? And at the end of the day, I think it's really important that you build businesses that can move with the current environment. And I think this asset class kind of allows that.
It's very much like a chameleon. It adapts very, very well, depending on how you build it. But you are right. A majority of the builds that you see are kind of the cheap, efficient builds. And, I'm a big car guy. And so a lot of times when I explain stuff to somebody, because, people will sometimes skimp on frontage, right? And we say, well, that's your paint job at the car show, right? That's what gets the attention. So we don't like skipping on frontage. And then, sometimes they'll go a little cheap, maybe do, lower ceiling height. Maybe the biggest thing is people don't park these assets, right? They'll do like one space per tenant, which if you go around and you'll see it, because you've seen a lot of flex spaces, the number one issue you probably see is parking, right? Just not enough parking. And so we always say, look, these things are just like cars, right? Do you want to get down the road or do you want to dominate the road? There's just two different paths that you can do when you go to build. And so when you do the efficient build, guess what? All the competitors that come around you, which they do, it's just like storage, just like retail. I mean, anytime you put one down, just be prepared for a competitor. But if you make yourself that outlier, you give yourself that amenities, you give yourself that extra boost, you'll beat 90% of the competition, because 90% of those guys are doing the cheap builds.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, we need some of the cheap stuff.
No, hey, look, the cheap stuff is good stuff.
The car mechanics need a place.
Well, and it's not saying like that. What it is, if you're really wanting to dominate the sector, you want to come up with a good concept that can do that and to tailors well to the tenants, and not just trying to cut as many corners as possible to save yourself money.
Right.
Because as you know, anytime you sometimes go about too much cost savings, it can sometimes cost you in the long run.
That's right.
And so that's what we try to get people not to do. Is to not focus on the today, but focus on to the tomorrow. Because that's where your money's made.
And so I know what's kind of the difference right now in the market with the big box stuff, the big tilt wall stuff compared to the small bay. Are you seeing, I've kind of read in some news that that slowed down a bit.
Slowed down quite a bit.
Yeah. There's some buildings kind of sitting around.
Yes. And, we don't deal in big box. Me and my guys, we don't. But Colliers has quite a few big box guys, and they'll tell you if it's over 200,000 square feet, it's almost like crickets right now on the leasing side. And because so much of the big box was also built to spec, right, which means they just built it in hopes that a tenant would come about. Well, you have so much now that is spec build that you do see quite a bit that is vacant, remaining vacant. And the issue that you have on the big box side is you usually don't have but one or two or three tenants, right? And so your loan that you're holding is really costing you a lot more than if you're building, multifamily or a small bay flex, to where you got tenants slowly coming in and taking space much faster at a much faster pace. And so I think that you will see some big box issues across the U.S. in the future. I think very simple to see, just because all you have to do is look at the amount of sublease space that's on the market, not just in Texas, but across the U.S. It's a historic high. And so anytime you have that much sublease, which is basically delayed vacancy, in my opinion, you are in for a little bit of trouble. And so that's why the office sector, is starting to see that, because it had so much sublease space over time, which is, a tenant leased the space, they're not occupying it anymore. So now we're trying to lease it out to somebody else to finish off our term, and we're going to cut them a deal. And so anytime you have that much sublease space, that's just delayed vacancy that is slowly coming aboard. And so you had a lot during COVID on the office side, and that's why you're seeing office buildings really struggle to release right now. And so I think on the big box industrial side, I think you'll see it. I don't think it's going to be a bloodbath or anything of that nature.
Sure.
But you got to keep in mind that's a completely different buyer pool too. At the end of the day.
It's the big boys.
It's the big boys. Yeah.
Yeah. Why didn't you ever really get into big box stuff, anyways? Is that
I never leased it.
Okay.
So I started my career leasing small bay, and because, like I said, the guy that I worked for, he didn't want me leasing the big stuff, because he was like, "That's my job.
Yeah.
You do the small stuff, And it probably didn't help that I went in there, and he's like, "What's your 5-year goals?" And I said, "Well, I want a Cadillac, and that's it. I never been in a car with leather seats before, and that's what I want. And so he said, well, let's figure out how to get it for you. And so it's because I never leased it, and I think if I would have, we'd probably be doing that. But like I said, I mean, it's a different animal. It's a different buyer pool, different seller pool, and especially on the build side, it's a lot different. And you don't have as many of the new developers coming in and building big box.
Right.
There's a little bit more complexities to it. The power requirements are different. The zoning, the infrastructure, the way they're built, a lot of that's substantially different. And so, but I'll be very curious to see how it works out over the future, because that's one of the few asset classes that doesn't have the greatest conversion capability.
Yeah.
And so, if you've got some of the, larger buildings that are struggling, and, if they do go into foreclosure, some of that nature, I mean, who picks it up, who waits, to get it released. And so, but when the market crashed in 2008 and 9, I mean, big box took a big hit, real big hit.
Yeah.
Especially across the GSW, the Great Southwest District. And so, it'd be very interesting to see how office and industrial shake out.
So what are some of the tips you can give somebody that's starting to look at this asset class and looking to develop? What are some basics as they're dipping their toes into this?
Well, we always say, and I've got a team around me, we've been together a long time, is put the right team around you. Because that'll help you get rid of a lot of your mistakes, right? The right engineering guys, the right people to talk to, the right agents, getting the right information, understanding the area, understanding if you want to build in the city, what restrictions and requirements you're going to have, because those are the things that we see people make the biggest mistakes on, is thinking they can rezone something. And it's actually not as easy as people think. And I'm a big believer, if it's not zoned for it, we don't even bat a second eye at it. We just move on to the next. And it's because we've been down that road so many times to where they just wouldn't rezone it, and we just don't have interest in doing that. And especially with Texas, there's just so much land, you can find something else. And so, because prime example, a guy out of Houston called us. He said, "Hey, do y'all sell medical office land?" I said, "No, why?" He goes, "Well, I bought it. I wanted to do small bay flex on it, but the city wouldn't change the zoning, and I already bought it."
Right.
I said, "Well, you need to find somebody that can specialize in selling medical office land." And so that's one of the bigger mistakes that we see, is kind of jumping the gun a little bit, having the right team around you, and then also building the right asset, building for the area, building for the future, and understanding how that looks. And so, sometimes it's easy for a new guy just to go out in the county where there's no restrictions, just start laying buildings down, but it just really depends on kind of what you're going for. But like I said, our favorite model, we like that. It works almost anywhere, but if the rents aren't there, then it doesn't make sense, because we'll see people go build stuff down in Cleburne and Burleson and whatnot. That market's tapped. That market's done. It's tapped. It's gonna be tapped for a while. You can go do new construction out there. You're not gonna even get $12 triple net. You got stuff that we sold a couple years ago that was getting 12 plus triple net. Today, now they're at 9, and it's because so many builders went out there and all built the same product type, because it's all county land.
Right.
There's no restrictions on any of it, so it's just got overbuilt. And it's just like you go up, to Aubrey 377. I mean, it's a metal building builder's dream. That's just all it is. And so understanding the area and how that can impact your build is another key, that is something that we see people make mistakes on, thinking that they can go out there and build all the other competitors around there, but somehow they're going to be in the limelight, but they're going to build the exact same product. So there's plenty of people that will go do that, but they'll build a superior product and be the envy of all and get tenants that way and have rates that way. And so it just really depends on what you're looking at. But yeah, those are the few mistakes that we see people make that end up costing them in the long run.
And this is why you need a broker.
Oh yeah, or just somebody that can help you understand the area and where the rents are, where they were, and where they're headed. Because you'd be surprised how many people will look at, hey, here's today's rates out there, but they won't look at last year's, the years before, the year before that.
Right, trending, right?
Which is what you really need to know.
Yeah.
And then you need to know the absorption of those years as well, because in many areas across the U.S., the absorption slowed down quite a bit because of the amount of build that's going on.
Yeah.
And so understanding all those factors is what we call the keys to success.
That's right. But I mean, back to my broker statement, in reality, that's why you do need part of your team, including, of course, your GCs, your engineering. All of that is a good broker, so that they can give you those numbers.
Good civil guy, too, to tell you what potential issues you'll run into that nobody ever sees.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe water issues, maybe some of that nature, because the last thing you want to do is, have the TCEQ on you because water's running off to the wrong area.
Yeah.
And so, there's a lot of factors that you got to look into when you're building anything, really, but especially with these.
Yeah, we ran into that a little bit in Midlothian. We did our soil test after we bought the lot. which you typically do. I mean, I guess that's not necessarily wrong, but we had the worst type of soil. And so,
What is it, rocky?
no, not rocky, clay, just
Clay.
not good. It's mainly clay. But creating an engineering team, we were scared about it first because he suggested some really expensive ways of remedying the situation. But the smart engineering team and the geotech, we figured out a resolution that still made the deal work. But to your point, I mean, those are some of the unknowns, right? Like, I mean, it's not typical for a guy to bore holes into a lot he doesn't own yet, right? To get a soil sample.
Yeah.
Or what do you see? Like,
Well,
actually, let me ask you
I mean,
that. What do
during
your due diligence period,
sometimes,
what all can you do?
So in your due diligence period, I mean, we see people do environmentals all the time. You know, sometimes they'll do geotechs, really depending on that. I mean, we advise doing as much upfront as possible.
Yeah.
You know, even if you end up losing a little bit of money and realizing something's wrong, it's better to realize it now than later.
Right.
As far as in your case, I mean, you know, some of those things, I mean, maybe you could have, you know, looked at it a little closer, but, you know, when it comes to soil, there's, you know, interestingly enough, I mean, there's so many things that you can always do with the foundations. And so I would imagine they probably recommended doing piers in there.
Yeah.
And that's usually what
Yeah.
will fix it with a clay or rocky soil, because even if it's rock, it's not always the best, even if you're sitting on straight rock, you know. And so a lot of times it can be fixed with piers. Interestingly enough, you know,
Yeah.
nobody's really doing post-tension cable or anything like that anymore. But no, I mean, people do plenty of geotechs. You know, if you're looking to change the zoning on it, you know, getting an engineering firm to go ahead and start trying to do that to figure out what the likelihood of that is very key to do as well. You'd be surprised how many people just are like, I'll give the city a great concept. There's no way they can say no. And cities, as you know, they love saying no. Like that's their go-to. And so they got their no guns and they're like, no. Like they love it. And so we brought a great design out to Weatherford and, you know, they're like, no, we'd rather have horse stables there. And so they're like, but we want you to build it over here instead. And so it's just, you just really never know. And so, but no, I think you did fine. I mean, you know, everybody kind of does it their own way, but get a geotech done, especially if the land has a lot of elevation issues to it, which I don't know if this one did or not.
No, actually, this one is pretty flat, and we've got buildings all around us. So quite frankly, I just assumed it was okay because we have a ton of buildings around us. Had there been no buildings around us and a lot of elevation issues, I probably would have done a geotech, a soil test, or environmental. But in this case, I was like, And, you know, come to find out I was right, even though there was a little bit of issue. But for the most part, it was easy to overcome. Initially, it scared me. But then once we figured out some solutions, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, this works. But I did learn from that. We will, moving forward, do soil tests on everything that we look at.
Well, if it makes you feel better, I bought a piece of land a long time ago, and apparently 2 inches below the surface was straight rock. And so everything I did there cost me so much more money.
Jeez.
You know, they had to put a septic system in. They had to rent the biggest rock crusher you'd ever seen.
Dang.
And if only I would have stubbed my toe and hit rock and seen that, but I didn't do it at that time, and that's whenever I found out, all right, we need to always look a little bit harder into these because, I mean, you know, drilling through rock because, you know, it had the well on it, and I mean, apparently I found the greatest rock shale in Parker County.
Yeah, it wasn't oil, it was rock.
It was just rock.
It's rock.
Yeah.
If it was oil, you wouldn't be here today.
No, I wouldn't. I'd be out there with my gas can right now.
Oh, man. Well, man, I honestly think this is really incredible, a good intro, and I can't wait to continue the episodes, kind of dig in a little bit more into the numbers, maybe the construction side of it, the due diligence. And so, guys, we have a lot coming up, and I'm just excited to have more of these episodes with Cody, and then maybe we'll talk even a little bit about what we're doing at Midlothian, use that as a sample of what can be done, and
No, I think it'd be great, and you know, I always encourage people to, you know, hey, reach out if there's certain topics you want covered. Holler, we'll figure it out.
That's right.
If we don't know it, like I always say, I believe I've got the best team around me.
Yeah,
we can figure it out. You know, there's nothing we can't figure out together, and so yeah, I'd love to go over more on, you know, not just that, but you know, syndicating, how these deals are put together, how they're evaluated, how to pitch it to investors. You know, maybe some areas where you can go source and get funds, because we also provide funds to people who are doing projects. If you know, if people want to bring us a project and maybe they need some extra money, you know, our team has a dedicated source that we'll put our own money into stuff. And so, you know, we can go over any of those topics, best practices, things of that nature. But yeah, very excited about this. I think it'll be very fun and interesting.
Yeah. And again, now Cody didn't pay me to do this. but he might have to. No. But get his book, Flex Space Domination. It's on Amazon. And what about your website?
Our website, flexbusinessparks.com.
Best
place to find us, yeah. And we're actually working on some testimonials. I had to get on to Michael. He got the wrong testimonials because we had somebody like, "Hey, ever since I read this book, I quit drinking." And I'm like, man, you paid the wrong folks, man. And so, my marriage has, been better.
Yeah, that's right.
And I'm like, God, I don't know where you got these at, but
yeah,
I think you did it as a parody. But
well,
I think we'll use them.
Yeah, well, you can pay me to give a review.
There you
I'll
go.
give you a good one. No, man. Hey, I'm so thankful you came by.
Absolutely.
I'm glad we're doing this together, and we've got so many cool more episodes coming out. This is going to be incredible, and it's a great asset class to be in. I think it's hot on fire, and we'll talk a little bit more about it.
It's going to be a fun ride.
Yeah.
I believe that.
Awesome.